Want to guess? It came to me in a dream. Actually, I can't remember how it came to me. Yeah.
This might not be exactly the way you're going, but I know how telescope mirrors are made. You can just take any two rocks, and if you keep rubbing them together the right way, you get spheres.
Well, that's true. One will become more convex, the other one will become concave. Yes, but making a fully round sphere instead of a lens, you really need to be able to measure all of the surfaces. And what we're looking for is something that would do the equivalent of this stainless steel. Does everyone get a good sense of how this works? It's pretty clear what it's doing. But all you really need is a circle, a perfect circle that you can use to measure your sphere, to tell what its roundness is.
Something in nature like a coconut.
Something in nature like a coconut might do it if you could cut that coconut just right. But there are things in these cultures that are even more common than coconuts. And I've already shown you some pictures of them. A ceramic bowl. All you need is a ceramic bowl with a circular rim, and all you have to do is set that bowl on the surface of the sphere, and you can use that bowl to measure the sphericity. And using a combination, go back a few slides to the guy with the hammer, using a combination of this technology, forward a couple of slides, and this technology, you're there. You don't need alien technology. You don't need laser beams. You don't need anything unusual to make these spheres. And if my hypothesis about the game is right, you don't really need any special technology to move these things much either. All you need is some time to spend in that riverbed finding the roundest cobble that you can, some hammers to begin shaping it, a ceramic bowl to figure out how spherical it is, and then a few objects to help you move it where
You
it is
also
that you want
need
to move it.
a reason for doing it.
Absolutely.
You got any theories about what motivated them?
I do. And you can
is
tell
it a
me,
religious impulse?
you can tell me what you think about my theory, and I'm about to present it. Okay, next couple of slides. Yeah.
I noticed that guy had a couple of your crossed logs with the guy with the stone hammer. So
Right, well, that's how-
so he could move it around and turn it.
Yeah, that's how he does it too. Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's those cross logs. By adjusting them, you can get the big sphere roll. Actually, go back to that slide if you could. I think you're right about that. Good eye. He's using basically the same principle right here. He's not going to pick that up and move it around, but by shifting these logs, he can get it to roll back and forth and work on different parts. That's exactly how he does it. That's not where I got the idea from. That's exactly what he's doing. Next slide. This is my colleague Francisco Corrales, who did his PhD with me here at the University of Kansas in 2000. He went on to become the director of the National Museum of Costa Rica for 7 years, and is now the world's expert on these stone spheres. He actually just opened a new museum in Costa Rica last month, and I just spent last week with him at Dumbarton Oaks. Among his major discoveries have been house foundations that are located in an area right with these stone spheres. In fact, houses that are located right next to the stone spheres. And in the early 2000s, in an excavation with Adrian Padilla, his partner, they were not able to excavate not only the wall of one of these houses, which actually is a huge, you can see the platform back behind it. This is the wall that goes all the way around this large platform. Next slide. They found a ramp leading up to the platform. And at the corner of the ramp was a stone sphere, one of the few that has been found in context. And in fact, we think that these stone spheres sat on the front corners of the ramps that went up to those large houses. I think there's another slide that will give you a sense. Here you can see some of the mounds behind. This is a ramp, and then this will be the platform on which the house is located back over here. Okay, well here's where it comes to my theory. And again, it's got different parts to it, and I'm going to simplify it a lot so that you may be able to grasp it. One of the characteristics of cheap chunk societies in southern Central America and northern South America is that they were very different from the ancient Mayas. They were different from the Incas. They were different from the Aztecs. One of the things that made them different is that they had what was called matrilineal descent, something which is a common characteristic of Native American groups. But it's one in which we know from the historic records in Costa Rica that the power of a chief did not pass to his son. The power of a chief passed to his sister's son. Okay? Anyone want to guess why that was so? Why might you want to do things that way? There's actually a Latin phrase that applies, for those of you who know Latin.
Nepotism.
No.
We should know who his sister's son is his family.
That's right. The Latin phrase is mater certa est. The mother is certain. And women know what this means. Guys don't like to think about it. I was doing my genealogy research, looking at my Civil War ancestors, went back even farther, and I found a lineage that went all the way back to England, like 30 generations ago. And my wife said, only a man would think that you could actually trace a lineage for 30 generations. She said, the women know, and you don't know parentage. You're exactly right. The son of your sister, you can be fairly certain is the descendant of your mother. A matrilineal line is much easier to trace. A paternal line, you don't know what's going on. There may be other lineages that come in. Well, in addition to being matrilineal, another characteristic of chieftain societies is that they were what was called matrilocal. And what this meant was that the matriline owned the land and owned the houses. All of the investment in these buildings, these massive buildings, was for the women and the women's families, in part because the men were highly mobile. They would travel across the landscape, they would go hunting, they would go fishing. They might even have another family or two in other villages. And the women might even have had another husband or two who came in when he was away. There was a management of relationships, but one in which it was very important in that type of fluid landscape of changing sexual partnerships and changing lineages. It was a very important statement for the guys to make it clear to the other guys that they had some claim or some kind of a stake. How do we do that in our culture? We put a wedding ring on our wife so that people, hopefully she'll wear it and people will see it and say, oh, she's already taken. Or in Hindu society, there's a dot on the forehead of a married woman that tells you, warning, do not mess with her, she's taken. And hopefully our wives put rings on our fingers, hoping that we keep these on and that we stay faithful. Well, it's these rings that made me think about this stuff. Here's my theory. A matrilineal household, which is protecting its matrilocal property, is one where you have something anchored and stable. It's going to stay there for generations maybe. The men had a vested interest in marking that as something which they had a stake in. And my theory is that the houses were owned by women, but the men provided... the men were the ones who provided the balls. And the balls in front of the houses were a way to indicate that in fact there was a permanent relationship or at least a lasting relationship between the women who owned the houses and the men who were making the balls. In addition to which, it takes a while to make these balls. It takes a while to move these balls. And these houses were filled with women and their sisters and their mothers and all of the women's clan group that owned the house. Well, I may sound sexist here, but I think that there's some things that are fairly universal. And if the house is full of the wife and her sisters and her mother and the children, the guys are going to say, honey, I need to go work on my ball. I've got some balls to move today. I need to go find some big boulders. And the ball, the artwork, the sculpture, provided an excuse, a rationale, a justification, a meaning, a cosmology in which the men were able to invest their energy in continuing this very important work, which was justified to the women by saying, this is really, really important. You have to have these balls in front of your house. And that was where they invested their time.
Has there been any conjecture about religiosity or spirituality with respect to these balls?
Yes, well, I have done it. And in fact, I still have not published these theories which I have, which I'm just projecting out to you on the basis of my 30 years of experience working in Costa Rica. Among the characteristics of Costa Rican culture is an intense effort in polishing and smoothing stones. Among the kinds of things you see here, the houses are built of these smooth, round river cobbles. Back up just a little bit to that wall, little one again, this one. These are very highly polished river cobbles. I think that they were using these not only because they were widely available in the rivers, but because of a religious, spiritual sense of nature. One of the most incredible things that you can witness in any context, but in Costa Rica in particular, is stone being shaped by water. Okay? Massive amounts of water rolling stone down the river bottoms, rolling these stones on top of each other takes a long time. But the notion of polishing, of wearing, of shaping is something that represents the life force of the planet. And my theory about this comes from the folk vocabulary of referring to stones in the Costa Rican landscape. And it's something that the farmers use, the campesinos, the people who live out in the country. And it struck me as really strange one day, actually, and I noticed it over a period of years because it's pretty ubiquitous, that there's a distinction between what's called piedra muerta, which means dead stone, and piedra viva, which means live stone. Now, for us, the term living rock means bedrock. Something is cut out of the living rock, it's cut out of something that's attached to the earth. It's the opposite in the folk vocabulary of Costa Rica. These are piedras vivas. Living rocks are the ones that are rolled and tumbled in the riverbeds. Living rocks are the ones that have a history of moving around. Living rocks are ones that have traveled from the volcanoes all the way down to the sea. Those are the rocks that are alive. Piedra muerta is that bedrock that isn't even shaped yet, that isn't even polished. What's the main difference between piedra viva and piedra muerta? It's smooth, it's rounded. And so the spiritual value that I think that they're thinking about is that humans, the guys who say, honey, I gotta go work on my boulder, sorry, I can't hang out with your mom today, are the ones who are continuing the work of nature by polishing these smooth stones. And polishing them is an extension of the work of nature through humans to represent the most finely finished form, which are these spheres. Go ahead to that picture of the sphere again. The most finely finished stones, which are not something that nature typically makes. They represent a human extension of nature, a human perfection of nature, as it were. And I think that this is part of what imbued these objects with very deep spiritual and religious meaning. Now we can speculate on other things about these spheres, and in fact there's a lot of speculation. We have very little confirmation of it. Although one thing that I do suspect is possible is that they knew that the moon was a sphere. If you are observing the play of light and shadow, you can tell that the moon is a sphere and not a disk. And I suspect they may have known that. So one possibility is that these represent moons. Well, the moon is also associated with the female menstrual cycle, which is lunar. So there may have been an association with fertility and the moon in these types of things.
Do these stones,
There may also have been an association with the tides, which are lunar. Yeah.
do these stones ever appear in art representations that might suggest they're...
We don't have representational art that shows people moving or shaping or
Really?
moving these spheres.
Amazing.
So we don't know. I'll show you. Let me show you what the art of this culture looks like. Yes.
The spheres, especially the ones that were found buried, was there any attempt to make them unique? Like if it's a man trying to show possession, would he put any kind of mark on it then? Or were they all just going for that perfection?
Not that we've been able to identify. They all seem to have been kind of going for that perfection,
Okay.
which may be an endless thing. Which basically means when the sister-in-laws and the mother-in-laws are getting to be a little bit too much, you've always got more stone to polish. Or to go fishing, or to do whatever else it is that they're doing.
What you're telling me is we're just at a higher level than animals. Animals are known to mark their territory. This is a marking of territory as well. It's a hell of a lot of work, I can see that. I believe in the rings more than the stone. But
It's a lot simpler solution.
yeah.
However, you can't see that ring from a distance. If you are somebody who's scoping out a village, to see, are there any of these houses of women that don't have stone spheres? It might be useful to be able to tell that from a distance before you wind up getting speared or shot. But that's just an idea. And again, your speculations are as good as mine, because the bottom line here is we don't know. The issue is coming up with a plausible hypothesis that we can test archaeologically then. Yeah.
Also, you might be forgetting how much stone somebody had to work to make that little gold band.
Well, there's a reason why it's valuable. It's a rare material. It's a very rare material. But let's talk a little bit more about this rare material. Next slide. Actually, this is a stone platform that's still being lived on today. It's a house up on top of it. This is an Indian village in southeastern Costa Rica. Next slide. The pottery of this area, I've shown you some examples of pottery. We'll go through the pottery fairly quickly. Just go through the next few slides. Some other examples of ceramics. Again. Here's where we want to get to. This is the artwork of this area that has been found in association with burials associated with these stone spheres. It is some of the richest, most exuberant gold work that has ever been done on the face of the planet. It's accomplished using a combination of gold and copper. It's actually a gold-copper alloy that's called tumbaga. And the way that these objects are made is something known as the lost wax casting process, which is something that's still done today to make college rings and high school rings and other jewelry, which is that this starts out as a wax model made from beeswax. All of these little details are made of tiny little rolls of beeswax. This is not wire. This is a model made with rolls of beeswax, details on the face and the nose, the legs. All of this is shaped in beeswax, soft beeswax that actually, it's not super soft, it's soft enough to work, but it's hard enough to keep its shape. And then what you do is you dip it in a liquid clay until it gets a thin layer of clay covering, and you keep dipping it and building up that clay until it's completely covered with clay, and then you enclose the whole thing in clay, having made a few vents and also a funnel type shape to hold the gold, and then you put it in a fire. This causes the wax to melt and run out of that hole, leaving a void into which you can pour the molten gold and copper mixture, which by blowing into it and applying pressure, you can actually extrude, or not extrude, inject into all of the little interstices of the wax mold. And then, once that cools, you break open the mold and you have a gold object, which you then finish by cutting off the little vents, by polishing it, by fixing the details, and then you come up with one of these pendants. We have lots of these gold pendants, and I'll show you some examples of them, because this is the artwork of the people who made the stone spheres, in addition to the ceramics that I showed you. Yes?
How big is that?
That one would be about that big.
Oh.
Okay, about that big. Maybe 10 to 15 centimeters wide, and maybe 4 to 5 centimeters tall. It actually has little loops on the back, and we think that they were hung on the chest. So they're sometimes referred to as pectorals. Some of them you'll see have bangles on them. They have surfaces that would have reflected light. And actually what these these are actually two views of the same one. What this particular one represents is a person with the head of a creature, probably a bat. He's got a little animal in his mouth. We can't really tell exactly what that animal is. And then instead of having arms, he has wings. And the wings terminate in the heads of crocodiles. And then he also has these stylized crocodile heads coming up from his feet, and then 2 more crocodile heads up on top. It's probably a representation of a magic worker. Some people would use the term shaman. I'm a little bit hesitant of that because shaman gets so overused these days for all kinds of things. But this is, I was talking about the werewolves and the vampires turning into bats and things like this. This would be a Costa Rican Batman, or Birdman, Birdman. Representing a mythological creature, but also, and actually here's where some of this mythology comes in. I actually like to describe it from what anthropologists describe as the emic view is the insider's explanation, and the etic view is the outsider's explanation. The emic view is that people can turn into bats, and that guy over there who's in charge of this community can turn into a bat and can fly into people's houses at night and can see what it is that they're doing. okay? And he can even bite them and suck their blood like a vampire bat. That's the emic internal explanation. The external explanation is, if you can persuade people that you can turn into a bat, then you can know stuff about what goes on inside their houses, and they don't have to know how you found out. Because they believe that in fact you entered their house as a bat. When in fact, it was the little brother or the cousin who came and told you, and you have an agreement with him, we're not going to discuss how you told me this. I'm just going to make sure everybody knows I can turn into a bat. And that's how I found out that so-and-so was with the woman with my balls. It becomes a practical way of explaining how you get information without revealing your sources. Right? Wouldn't that be helpful to all of us? If our children really believed that moms had eyes on the back of their heads? Or if our
NSA.
Or if our or NSA, that's right, NSA could say, and like I said, Arthur C. Clarke said, any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. The NSA is magic. They know what's in your bank account. They know the cell phone call that you made yesterday. But if you ask them how they know that, they can say, it's magic. You know, we have our means. We have our sorcery. And in fact, for me, this thing is magic. Okay, I can't tell you how this works. This is a magical device. We're surrounded by magical devices all the time. Well, magic and magical explanations are ways of explaining how we know things. We're smart enough to know that the FBI and the CIA are providing the White House with all kinds of information. The NSA is informing President Obama on how to do all kinds of things, including where to send drones to kill people. But wouldn't it be really useful if President Obama could say, well, you know, I'm just a bat. I can fly out and I can see where those guys are. Or I can project my spirit thousands of miles. And I was in Afghanistan last night in my dreams, and I saw exactly where that guy lived, and that's why we targeted him with the drone. In ancient societies, it is much more useful to sustain a mythology of magical abilities than to get into the nitty-gritty details and explaining how you actually know something. Because that's how power is manipulated. That's how the NSA works. That's how the drones work. That's how the IRS works. They don't tell you how they know what they know. And what happens when you don't know how they know what they know? What is the effect of that on a population? Fear. And fear. Fear. Why are the terrorist alerts at orange today? We're not going to tell you. Why do you have to take your shoes off at the airport? We're not going to tell you. We just know. We just know. And this becomes a method that we use all the time. We don't call it magic. When we look at it in these ancient societies, it's much more clear why they're using the artwork and the explanations that they are, and why magic is alive in these cultures. Next slide.
Yeah.
And I'll just show a few